Welcome to week 25 of Valor Discipleship. Through this video, I want to visit with you about the testimony portion of Valor Discipleship. So we will be talking about the next 5 weeks of the Valor Discipleship journey, weeks 25 through 29. Now, week 25 starts with the title, Tell His Story Through Our Testimony. And so we're going to be talking about how to walk with others and instruct ourselves on how to write an effective testimony that points to Jesus. This section is a turning point in the Valor Discipleship journey. During this time, we're going to talk about how we're going to use the way He has equipped us to go and make disciples, and we're going to do that through our story. So this section will definitely catapult us into being fully equipped to be ready to go and make disciples. So I want to walk through the objectives of these next 5 weeks, and also week by week what we're going to do in large group and in small group. All right. So first of all, the objective. Keep in mind that God is the center of our testimony. So that's why it's titled Telling His Story Through Our Testimony. We want to continue to point back to Jesus. Ultimately, we're going to make disciples. We want to go and make disciples. We want to share with others the love, the faithfulness, and the salvation of Jesus. And we're going to do that through them understanding who He's been in our lives. And so our testimony always points other people to Jesus. It always makes God the center. That is so important. I also want you to understand that this time of writing your testimony, sharing your testimony, is a time where we develop boldness and confidence. The enemy would like us to pull back in shame and condemnation of our past, but seeing God's hand in our past gives us boldness to step into all that He has for us, and gives us boldness in sharing our faith with others, gives us boldness in sharing who God is because we've seen Him in our lives. So keep that the central, that truly our testimony is not about us or our story. It's truly about God and others seeing Him through our story. Now in week 25, you're going to introduce the participants of Valor Discipleship to writing their testimony. You will have people come to the meeting with all different perspectives on writing a testimony. Some of them may be fearful or intimidated, and they don't want to share their past, or they're afraid they're going to have to bring up dirty laundry. But continue to remind them that they're going to walk through a process with God, and we're going to walk through the process with each other, that we will continue to point each other to Jesus, that we will definitely see God's faithfulness, and that will trump any intimidation the enemy tries to bring in sharing our testimony. So in week 25, you're going to introduce them to this concept of creating His story through our testimony. So making sure they understand what this perspective in writing a testimony looks like. So you're going to talk about that, and then you're going to assign them the homework. Make sure they understand the homework. The homework is them answering questions. All right. So in week 25, you're going to have them go over the questions with them, have them do their homework between week 25 and 26, and all they're doing is answering the questions. So they write down the answers to each question, and then be ready to come back on week 26 and share that in their small group. So make sure they understand they're not writing out their testimony this week. They're just writing the answers to the questions and being ready to share those answers. I would suggest that as a large group, you go over these questions. All right. The other thing that you may want to do during this time is a timeline. So week 25, and you could also do this during week 26. You might choose which week you want to do it, but a timeline is a great way for them to write out their testimony, for them to see the faithfulness of God. So you can have a large piece of paper, maybe some newsprint, and put it up on the wall. All right, and use your testimony as an example. And on this newsprint, you're going to make a point of life and a point of death. right? So you can put the year you were born, put a little point there, and then an estimated death. Give yourself 80 or 90 years and put a point there, right? Draw a line on this paper that you've displayed for them. Then put a point where you are now, your age right now, all right? And so between your age right now and your birth, you're going to make marks on the timeline, and you're going to talk about things that have been very significant to you, times in your life as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, as an adult. Mark things that were significant to you spiritually, emotionally, things that you remember that were good, things that were hard. Mark those on their significance. And then I would suggest that you take your thumb and you put ink on it, and that you go back and you begin to put a thumbprint where you see God's hand. Show them that even in the good times, in the hard times, maybe even before you had a relationship with God or turned your life over to Him, there's a thumbprint of seeing who God was. Obviously, the point is to see God's faithfulness in our life. So it's not just about us and our story, but it's about His faithfulness. The other thing that this timeline does is you see that you've written things about your life. You've seen the thumbprint, the faithfulness of God in your life, but then you have this section that's empty. You haven't lived it yet. And we can encourage those that we're leading to say, God has always been with us, and He will continue to be with us. All our hopes and dreams for the future fall into this. It's an empty slate, and we can believe and walk out in faith the things that God has shown us to do, or we can be obedient to Him because He is always faithful. So the timeline is a really good thing to do one of your beginning weeks, and you can choose which week is best. Sometimes I even have the participants get out a piece of paper, create their own timeline, or have them do that as homework where they can see the thumbprint of God in their life. So that kind of helps give them a systematic way to write out their testimonies. So timeline is a great thing to do, and answering the questions that are assigned in week 25 homework. So as you enter in week 26, that large group, you're going to share with them the timeline if you didn't do in week 25. You're also going to, in the small group, have them talk about the answers to their questions with their group, pray over those. All right. Then in week 26 large group, you want to assign the homework that they're going to write out their testimony in paragraph form. So they're going to take the answers to their questions from week 25 homework, and they're going to write in paragraph form in week 26 homework. All right. Then you get to week 27. In week 27, they are ready to share their written testimony with their group. So take week 27 and week 28 if you need it. Minimize your large group time, have them get into their small groups, and they're going to read what they wrote out. Now, in week 26 homework, they've written out their testimony in paragraph form. Strongly encourage them to do this. They need to write it out. You've given them the opportunity to think about it, process it, talk to the Lord about it, and then write it out. Then they're going to read their testimony. They're going to read their written testimony to their group in weeks 27 and weeks 28. All right. They will read those out loud to their groups. This is really important. It's important that they write it down. The reason they need to write it down is we don't want off-the-cuff testimonies. We don't want people processing through their testimony out loud with their group. We want them to pre-think it, to write it down. The other thing is you only have so much time. And so when you have someone write it, then they can read it, and it helps keep everybody on the amount of time you've allowed for sharing testimonies. When you dedicate both weeks 27 and 28 to this, they not only have time to read their testimonies, they have time to pray over each other. All right. So that's what you're doing in week 27 and 28. Now in week 29, you're going to all stay as a large group, and you're going to have people share their testimonies. In week 29, I would encourage you, do not have them read testimonies, but choose people that in weeks 27 and 28 that read their testimonies you feel like would be very good to share with the large group. So you want them on week 29, bring everybody together and have a few people that you choose as the leader to share their testimony with the large group. Another option for week 29 is to invite others in to hear the testimonies. Now, you're not going to have everybody share. Not everybody will be ready to share with the large group, but you do want to invite some of those to share. Others need to hear their testimonies. They need to practice sharing it. And so if you want to invite others in, that's great. That's a great time for others to hear what's going on in Valor Discipleship. That's a great time for them to see and witness what God is doing in people's lives. And so that's a good thing to do on week 29. Okay, so a quick recap. Week 25, you're going to introduce it, possibly do the timeline. Week 26, you're going to encourage them to take the questions they did in week 25 and share those with the group in their small group, and then assign the homework to write in paragraph form. If you haven't done the timeline, you could do that in week 26. Week 27 and 28 are going to spend mostly in small groups, reading their testimonies to each other and praying together. And then week 29, everybody stays as a large group, and a few of the testimonies are shared with the large group. I am praying for you. This is such a beautiful 5-week time in the Valor Discipleship journey. People are reflecting on the faithfulness of God. They're learning how to process through that, pray together, and share with each other. And that is going to be so significant as they go and make disciples. They have a story to share about who God has been in their lives, and that testimony will point others to Jesus. So I'm praying during this significant time of the Valor Discipleship journey.